Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on? I'm going back.
Welcome back, everybody. Bacon and Egg Show, October 17th, 2020, show number 26. Half a year in the books.
How about that?
We're getting there. We're getting there. Good morning, Jay. It's a nice, cool day outside. Pretty pleasant. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Yeah, beautiful day. Well, maybe not beautiful. Very nice weather in terms of the temperature we're enjoying these days, and a little sprinkle out here today. But looking forward to a good day. Trying to go 1-0 today.
It's all we can do.
It's all we can ever ask for is just go. Let's go 1-0 today on this show. And luckily, we don't really have. I mean, we definitely have horn stuff to talk about, but we won't have to sit here and wonder whether or not they're going to show up today since they don't have a game. So. We'll get into that and a bunch of other good stuff today, man. If you want to hop right in, where are we starting off with today?
Man, let's start off with the biggest news from yesterday and going into today and carrying over into today is the Houston Astros.
Hot damn.
The last time that we recorded was before the series started. We kind of, we were like, well, we'll see if this goes the way we want. We'll know the result by the time we record Saturday. Maybe if it doesn't go the way we want, we'll know the result by Saturday. And here we are. A few days ago, it looked like we knew pretty clearly what the result of this series was going to be and what we were going to be discussing on this show. Tampa had a 3-0 series in this lead, or 3-0 lead in this series, and now it's 3-3. We have a game 7 tonight. Winner take all to go to the World Series. Only the second team in Major League history to come back from a 3-0 deficit in a series to force a game 7. The last team to do that was the 2004 Red Sox that broke their, the big story about breaking their curse, beating the Yankees. They go on to win the World Series. How the hell did we get to a game 7 being down 3-0? How do we have this? Like, what did the Astros change? What did they do to get back into this thing? And now with all the, I know it's an illusion, but all the momentum.
Yeah, momentum is definitely an illusion. At least Herman would tell you that. So with the Astros, man, you look at those first 3 games, they were hitting the ball hard. They were seeing the ball well. They were getting really unlucky they were just hitting it right at guys. And a part of that is the shift and analytics, and Tampa has been in the forefront of that with the Astros in terms of using those sort of numbers to position players on the field when a certain batter is there, and that's a part of it. But also just the straight unlucky batting average that they had through those first 3 games. Like the expected batting average, I don't want to get too much into these statistics, but like when you combine the launch angle with the speed of the ball off the bat and things like that, there's a percentage of time that it falls for a hit. And the Astros were way on the other side of that, way unlucky with putting the ball in play. And I almost feel like that it's starting to work itself out now as the series has progressed. Not only have the Astros found holes just by hitting it into the gaps, but they've also had some seeing eye singles to continue innings. They've taken advantage of a couple of mistakes that Tampa's made, and they've got the right bats have started to get hot again, and I think when the top of the lineup started to really hit, and when they started to dink and dank and dunk a little bit, and then you see some big swings by Altuve and by Springer, and the only person that isn't going right, yeah, especially Carlito over here, but the only person that hasn't been really going is Bregman. He hit a couple of double plays last night, and just imagine if he gets going, and I'm just only talking about the hitting right now, Kerry. I'm not even addressing the pitching that the Astros have had through these last 3 games.
Yeah, I'd add Yuli Gurriel to that hitting aspect of someone that's been getting contact, but just not getting the ball into play at all, like to actually get on base. His average has been poor. He's been bad the entire postseason, but
but Dusty, there hasn't been a point where Dusty's ever felt like, I got to pull this guy because he's not producing. He knows, Yuli's definitely there, and he's still found a way to get on base a couple of times. He's he's a guy you want in your lineup.
Yeah, for sure. On the pitching thing, I've just been impressed by the kids, the kids in this pitching rotation. I mean, and this we'll get a little bit further into this about kind of our expectations of getting to this point and what this season was going to hold and all these things. But like, you don't have Justin Verlander. He's done. He obviously he missed this season. He's going to miss next season. Garrett Cole went to the Yankees. The closer in Osuna done for the year. Lose guys like, I mean, just thinking about that bullpen from last season, that was, you know, pretty solid. Like losing guys from that to free agency and whatnot. But like, here they are. You know, Lance McCullers comes back healthy this season, and he's going to be on the mound tonight for Game 7 against our longtime friend and hero Charlie Morton, now on the other side to try to win a Game 7. Great. Wonderful. I feel
Charlie
real
Morton
confident about that.
That hasn't lost a playoff start since he's been in Tampa. That Charlie Morton.
Yeah, and actually, my only, before we dive too much into a Game 7 preview, my only hope for Charlie Morton is that Tampa decides to really stick to a certain kind of set number of pitches for him, and he only goes about 4 innings, and then they start to get those other arms out of the pen, which the Astros have had success with. But the Astros pitching has been really impressive for me. I think Framber, what he did yesterday, and he's been the Game 1, the top of the lineup ace starting this series for the Astros. He was fantastic yesterday. I mean, just lights out. What do you make of this pitching situation? What do you think of Framber yesterday?
Well, that's ace stuff. I mean, you can see that once he figured it out, it was one of those things where he's one of those guys that you take and it's just raw stuff, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. He has that moment where he starts to improve. He starts to the stuff isn't as raw anymore. He can locate his pitches, and he's really evolved into what I believe will be the Astros ace of the future, health permitting. He just has ace stuff. I mean, and to go out there and to excel in that moment, it's never been too big for him. The moment has never been too big for Framber Valdez, not once. And he's shown time and time again that he'll answer the call when you need somebody to be that stopper. What you expect if your team's on the skid. Okay, we got our ace coming up tomorrow. We'll get back on the right track. He seems to be that kind of guy, and it's the Astros are very fortunate to have found the right type of guys. The development of their prospects in their minor league system has been extraordinary. One of the best pitching coaches in the game. Dusty Baker has found a way in these playoffs to push the right buttons with these guys, especially when you were talking about all the younger pitchers. When in Game 5, when the first 5 pitchers that were in the game were all rookies.
Yeah.
And then you go to Josh James, who, man, I don't know if he's ever going to figure it out, but
he's about the only one that I would say should not. I mean, Dusty's going to do what Dusty does, but and at this point, I trust his decision making on this. Like, my questioning of Dusty Baker is faded in terms of how he's managing a pitching staff, because this entire postseason he's been right on top of it. But Josh James is someone that I really hope we don't need to see in Game 7 tonight. But yeah, those rookies just one after another coming out to support. And real quick, one thing on Framber from the game last night, that moment that he had when Yandy Diaz, the confrontation, whatever you want to call it, where Correa stepped in and had a talk with Framber to kind of like hype him up in a way, like get him refocused. And I know some people kind of caught on TV kind of what he was saying, or tried to kind of pick up on what Correa was saying, but basically just like, don't worry about that guy. Like, your job is to help us win this game. Like, get it together. To me, that was kind of a pivotal moment last night, because the Astros bats kind of came back alive. It's almost like there was this, I don't know, it was kind of like a rallying point where Tampa had some guys on base, and it turned, I don't know, it to me, it seemed like kind of where the Astros finished the job, decided like, yeah, we're not going home tonight. let's finish this thing off.
Yeah,
We got
and
some more runs on the board and did it.
we're watching Carlos Correa. In my mind, he's auditioning to be the face of a franchise. Whether or not it's Houston is another story with his contract coming up soon. It's next season, right? He's a free agent after next year, is it?
I think so. I think there's an option on it, and I don't know, so I don't know if it's next
Yeah,
season and then an
but
option, or if next season is the option and how that plays out.
but
But
either way, they're gonna have to make a decision on him soon. And whether or not he sticks around in Houston or he goes somewhere else, he's showing right now that as a leader, and with his bat, with his glove, with his arm, and with his leadership abilities, I feel like he's showing everybody right now that he's the type of guy that you can build a franchise around, build a team around. Uh, and I'm very happy to see it because for I know he was struggling there for a little while, um, and we were sort of not wonder not maybe I mean last year we're looking at him, God, Carlos, come on, man. There were certain situations, and it just seems like he's healthy now. He's put it all together. He's playing like Carlos Correa of 2017, and That's the guy that we were so excited about, being around this franchise for the next however many years at that time. And he's really blossomed into that, the guy that you want to be when you get a number one overall pick. He's really like he is turning into like
yeah,
when you look back at some of the best number one overall picks in the history of baseball, he's going to be on that short list.
yeah, it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see how the Astros approach this. We know this is tonight, as we've been saying since Tampa went up 3-0 in this series. Each game could be George Springer's last game in a Houston Astros uniform. Of course, that's not a done deal yet, but I have a hunch that he's not going to return. I think he's going to get a ton of money elsewhere, and good for him. And he's one of the greatest Astros ever. I wonder if this Correa, the way that he's played, the way that he's showing leadership, the way he kind of spoke up for the team when the scandal hit, all these things that he's been doing to put himself in front of everybody as a leader, and I mean also his play too. I mean, it's not like he's just a vocal guy that's not producing. Does this almost kind of this offseason, is this going to be a hard look at the Astros saying it's going to be Springer or Correa?
Oh yeah, I absolutely. And I think that you have to make that decision. You can't pay both of them.
Right. Altuve's already
So
locked up.
right.
Like that's done. Bregman got his contract extension. So yeah, I mean,
But for me, I would rather sign the shortstop than the outfielder. When you if you're just comparing, if you show me A and B, these are the players, these are the stats, these are the positions, these are the intangibles.
yeah,
I think you have to the shortstop. Think about that infield. That's
yeah,
the best infield in baseball. You could put me over at first base, and if you have Altuve, Correa, and Bregman I mean, but I do think that they'll have to take a long, hard look at that because it's not like Springer's chopped liver. That's the guy that's top 5 all time in terms of playoff home runs. He's up there now. Is it him and Altuve tied now for most home runs in Astros postseason history? Altuve is up there too, and either way, like you
yeah.
said,
They
he's
keep trading home runs. They keep going like
right.
back and forth. So it's like, oh, now Springer's 4th all time in MLB history, and now Altuve's 5th, and then they just keep, which is great. But
What a good problem to have for us to not know where they rank in the top 5 in the playoffs.
right,
But that's the thing, though, is you look at Springer. If he retired tomorrow, or if he retired at the end of the season, whenever that is, he would already be one of the greatest Astros in the history of the franchise, without a doubt. And you could make a case. He's a borderline Hall of Famer already, in my opinion.
I mean, his defensive play, his postseason play. I mean, I think when they showed that the list of players with more home runs, I think Manny Ramirez and was it Reggie Jackson are the only two or something, or Pujols, that are ahead of him at this point. I think all those guys are, I know Pujols isn't retired yet,
Yeah, I
unfortunately.
mean, Yeah, but I mean,
like
Springer, World Series MVP.
World Series
You,
MVP. Yeah.
you've got all. I mean, I get it. It was everything that came with it, but still, World Series MVP. I don't know, man. Maybe I don't know that I'm reaching too far there in terms of thinking that he's already sort of a borderline Hall of Fame guy, but he's going to continue to play and be successful, and that guy's going to be successful anywhere he goes. You just plug that guy into the leadoff spot of your lineup, and you turn away and you let him mash. I don't know, man. It's going to be tough. It's a really big decision for the Astros, and I think you have to go into it knowing Correa's probably going to get paid more than Springer. You're probably going to have to invest more in the shortstop than you would the outfielder. And when you look at what the Astros have in the outfield right now, with you have Tucker now that's out there. You hope that there's some of these young guys can continue to develop, but there's going to be a hole there in the outfield without Springer. Definitely, you can't. I talk about that. It's hard to replace a guy of that talent and pretend like it's not a big deal. But I think you could. I think they would have more success trying to replace Springer than to replace Correa.
Yeah. I mean, the Astros are looking at losing Reddick, Springer, and Brantley all from that outfield. However, you've got Tucker. You hope Yordan Alvarez can come back healthy enough to play in the outfield.
Right.
You've also got Straw, who has been decent out in the field, and you feel like he's eventually going to get his shot at being a day-to-day player.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think in Round Rock he was playing a bit of infield too, though, right? He was filling in at shortstop and second and doing that stuff. But I mean, the guy's got wheels. He can play defensively.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I think it is. I mean, just in baseball in general, it's easy to replace an outfielder than it is to replace a shortstop of that quality. And I mean, obviously this will all play out in the offseason. We'll get further into it. But I mean, I think the young pitching emerging the way that it has is also, maybe they do think that they're going to have enough budget to make both happen, because in case of, there's not a case now where the Astros are looking at not having Justin Verlander next year and saying that they have to go spin big to get another starting pitcher. They go, hell, we got it now.
Yeah.
So we'll see, but it's going to be interesting tonight. I mean, Game 7, winner take all, trip to the World Series on the line. It's this time next week. We're either talking about the Astros being, I don't know when the World Series is scheduled to start, because I know the Dodgers and Braves still have to finish that series, but maybe we'll be talking a little bit more World Series than we would otherwise next week, and did not expect us to get to this point. So
no, not after Wednesday night. Didn't expect to be sitting here talking about this so positively today. And it's, no matter how this season ends, it's sort of, we kept saying all year, this team was way too talented not to be successful. This team was way too talented not to put it together at some point. And we always talk about how they can just go on these streaks of white hot, just bats are hot, everything's working, pitchers are good, bullpen's good. And they're, these last little 3 days, this stretch of games, they've played like the team that we know that they can be. Excuse me. But no matter how it ends, I think you have to really look positively at what's coming next season with what you have out of these young players, and then you make those tough decisions with the contracts in the off season. But how did you do you feel the same way in terms of like, yeah, are the windows closing? You need to win a World Series, but you like what you see out of this team. Like, how are you feeling about the way this has gone down?
So it's interesting because, we talk about this team being under 500 at the end of the season. And while we kind of, we had those discussions about they have all this talent, they just need to get hot. They never seem to do it during the regular season. This was also one of those seasons where, if they would have lost earlier in the postseason or something like that, like, it wouldn't have been that upsetting, because as talented as this team is, like, there were so many factors that contributed to them being under 500. I mean, you lose your ace to injury, you lose your closer to injury, you have a new manager, you have the clouds of scandal hanging over your team for the entire season, which was a shortened season where it never seemed to really get its feet under it. all those factors played into kind of like, well, all right, get into the postseason, but my expectations aren't that high. Like there are some other really good baseball teams out there, and if the Astros don't get, you know, that far through this postseason, well, whatever. At this point now, a game away from the World Series, I mean, to me, it just feels like no matter what happens tonight, they've now exceeded my expectations. I mean, maybe not at the beginning of the season, but as the season progressed, it was, felt like it was just not one of those seasons. But here they are, and a chance to go to the third World Series in 4 years for this franchise. It's amazing. It's really amazing that they've like go down 3-0 in the series and get to a game 7 in itself is historic. And
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what happens tonight, but to beyond that, yeah, I had the feeling, I think we've discussed it here, about kind of like this was kind of the closing of the window. This season was kind of the last time that we felt we were going to see this group in this form. Springer, Altuve, Correa, Bregman, like that core of players. Like this is when we started to see that getting chipped away. This is the last go. Like we just talked about with Springer, we discussed that there was probably going to be some kind of tough decision made on Carlos Correa going into the last year of his contract. Is he going to be dangled out there for trade bait? Is Altuve's play declining? Is Bregman the same player he was before the scandal? Like there were all these kinds of things that you felt like it was about to get blown up. You see Tucker coming through the ranks. You've got Jordan, even though he missed the season, like these young guys coming through the system where you go, all right, now it's time to kind of rebuild. And I don't feel that way anymore. I sure Springer might move on. And Brantley, who's been just a pro, might move on as well. Probably going to move on.
The professional of all professionals, Mike.
Oh,
Uncle Mike.
Pro's pro.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, with the young pitching coming through, I don't know. I feel like they're doing a good enough job to keep this thing going into next season, especially if these players seem to like kind of have gotten out of that funk, out of the scandal funk, and have kind of, I think Correa's had a big say in that. And we'll see. I mean, this is going to be a really important offseason.
Yeah.
How it's managed.
Yep. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to tonight though, and game 7, what do you feel like is going to go down tonight?
I think it's going to be tight first few innings between McCullers and Charlie Morton. I think the game plan from the Astros is going to be to try to make the at-bats against Morton as long as possible. You might not get a lot of action. You might not get a lot on base and get a lot of runs across or anything like that. But if you can get his pitch count up early and keep that pressure on to where Tampa starts going, he's at 60 through 3 innings, he's coming back around to the top of the order, and you want to make them kind of panic a little bit in terms of how they're going to manage the pitching staff, because Morton is not going to go. I just don't see Charlie Morton going any longer than 5, and that's if he is just absolutely dealing. To me, that's the key. Lance McCullers is McCullers. I think he's going to do what he does. He might give up a run or two early on as he settles in, which tends to be his kind of thing. Then he gets into his groove and he starts sinking those curveballs in there, and it's, then I have faith in the Astros bullpen at that point. Probably go to Javier, keep those guys coming in. Do you think you see Greinke tonight in a late game, in any kind of late game situation?
No. I don't think that's his I don't know. I feel like he's such a creature of habit. He's such a, I don't know.
He doesn't strike me as a bullpen guy. Want to come out of the pen in a leverage situation, right?
No, I don't know, man. I don't think that's I think Dusty trusts his guys enough in the bullpen to get that done. And Presley, as shaky as he's been
finishing.
He's been finishing games, and I don't think you vary from that at this point. I agree with what you're saying about getting to Chuck F and Morton early. Um, that was the recipe for success against Snell,
Yeah.
the guy that looks like he hasn't slept in 3 weeks. Uh, and he was mad when they took him out.
Yeah.
He was not happy with it. He felt like he had more to give, but that's just not the way that they coach and run that pitching staff. It's hard to second guess the guy because they were so successful this year. They had the best record in the league and all that stuff. So it's hard to really say like, well, why are you doing this? Because I'm winning with this way of doing it. But he didn't win any favors from Snell last night by pulling him early. That's what you got to do. You got to get to him. Get that pitch count up. Astros have been very selective as the series has gone on. They're becoming more and more selective, swinging at more strikes, not swinging as many pitches out of the strike zone. They can pull this off tonight if McCullers doesn't let it get out of hand early. He's given up a couple of home runs.
Yeah.
You don't want to see McCullers go like you need McCullers to go 5 at least.
Yeah.
I don't want if he gets up there, if his pitch count gets up there, or if he just gets hit around early and he goes like 2 1/3, that ain't good. I don't think that bodes really well. I know that's kind of easy to say, but that's the situation that I could see this going the wrong way for Houston. Is if McCullers goes out there, hangs a couple of those breaking balls after maybe walking a guy or two, that could really be disastrous for Houston. But if they can just keep swinging at balls that are in the strike zone, hopefully keep that luck going that they've had with finding holes and within the shifts and with where the outfielders are hitting it into the gaps, and we're just hitting it where people aren't. I think the Astros can do this tonight. It's must-watch TV now. It's the late game right now since the NLCS was extended last night.
Yeah, it's gonna be a 7:40, I think, first pitch. So late night. I know it's going up against Alabama and Georgia, but who cares? It's Game 7 to go to the World Series.
The people that were gonna watch the Astros in Game 7 weren't. I think they would. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think those are necessarily two conflicting audiences in the grand scheme of things. I know what I'll be watching anyway. So I don't know, man. I'm optimistic about tonight because they're playing like that. It reminds me a lot of what the 2017 team played like, just loose and having fun and with fire and with passion and the leadership and from the right guys at the right time. It seems to me like this is meant to be. But we'll see, man. I hope it happens. It should be a great game. I hope it really turns into one of those classic Game 7s.
Yeah.
And hopefully the Stros can come out on the good end of it.
Yeah, but my key to the game is a phrase that we've been using a lot in this postseason in regards to the Astros, and it's experience matters.
Yeah.
This is a stage the Astros are not new to. Game 7 last year against Washington in the World Series, extra innings, against the Yankees throughout the playoffs over the years, all these things. My key is if the Astros play clean in the field of play. The 2 of those Tampa wins essentially hinged on Jose Altuve errors that led to Tampa getting out enough to hang on and win. If the Astros play clean, and I think that's the key to the game. I think that's what's changed since since they started getting back into this series is, just them being able to kind of control what they can control, and they seem calm. Tampa seems like they're panicking a little bit. You see some of the faces in the dugout last night. There was a lot of heads and hands, and I think the Astros are basically walking in there today going, we've been here before, where Tampa has all the pressure in the world of being the second team in history to blow a 3-0 lead and lose a series. I think we're going to see it early on. Like you said, if Lance is dialed in, this is going to be a fun one. I think it's going to be a fun one regardless, but yeah, I hope it's just good baseball all the way through. So,
Yep.
all right. Well, it's good Astros talk there. Let's move along a little bit here. We'll jump into this real quick. Arsenal play today. They're back from the international break. They're playing at Manchester City. City sitting like 14th in the league or something coming into today. Really rocky start for them to the league campaign, and Arsenal sitting in 5th, I think, as of now. I know there's other games in action, but tough run coming up for Arsenal these next few weeks. Just wanted to get your thoughts on this. Get City today. Midweek is a Europa League game. The next weekend host Leicester City. Then another midweek Europa League game. Then travel to Manchester United. Then a Europa League midweek game before hosting Aston Villa. I put Aston Villa in there because they're playing really, really well, and they're up in the top 4, and they're not an easy out right now. So, Jay, what do you think about that run over the next 3 weeks?
Yeah, that's a tough run. That's a tough run in the league without having to play Europa League matches in between. That's tough for any club, period. To go to Man City today, Leicester City's Leicester City. They've been playing really well as a club the past few seasons. United is Man United. You have to go there, and then Villa. They should handle their business in the Europa League matches. I don't really see them having much trouble there, even with playing some of the younger guys.
Yeah,
But that's a tough stretch, man. If you get out of those 4 matches, if you get 6 points, for me, I think that's okay. I don't think you want to get blown out in any of these. And I think Arteta's sort of the culture shift since Mikel Arteta has been the manager at Arsenal. I'm not saying they've already, they lost 3-1 earlier in the season to Liverpool, but earlier in the year, but like, I don't think Arteta is going to allow his team to get blown out, if that makes sense. Like the way that he's going to put people in a position to be successful, I don't think Arsenal hopefully we'll have any of those big like 5-1 losses or something like that. But Kerry, this is a tough stretch. Hoping to get 6 points out of those next 4 league matches, and then obviously do well in the group stage of Europa League, handle their business there. So I think it's doable. You just have to manage the players, and there's going to be some guys that'll step up during this stretch that we're not expecting to, just be out of necessity and having to play. So how do you sort of feel about this stretch coming up?
Yeah, it's a tough run. I think the Europa League group stage games are going to see a lot of kids. That's going to be a lot of reserves and some of the younger players getting some game time, because I think that's just going to be the rotation. It's, Thursday games, then coming back on a Saturday or Sunday to play, a league game is tough. Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot about kind of where this team really is after this run, because this starts getting into November, and, at that point, I don't know, I forget, you're looking at about 10 games, getting close to a third of the way into the season, and you're going to have a pretty good idea of who you are. And I mean, the point total thing, 6 points, 6 to 8 points, I think is probably pretty reasonable. But to me, I mean, it's just been such a wacky league season. If you get through this run, you're still there around the top 4, you're still within striking range of, the top 2 or 3 teams, then that's all you can ask for. And I'm excited to see the new signing. I don't know if he's going to play today, but Thomas Partey from Atletico Madrid was brought in, and he is all action. I mean, he is a big, fast defensive midfielder that can play with the ball at his feet. I think he's exactly the kind of player Mikel Arteta is wanting to kind of form his Arsenal team around. So big signing. Love to see him today against City. Don't know if he's quite ready yet, but we'll see.
Yeah, that'll be nice, especially if Arteta wants to go 3 in the back and have him sort of sitting right in front of that defense. He's the guy that can cover sideline to sideline and really make an impact on the game no matter where he is on the field. So I thought that was a really great get for Arsenal. I'm looking forward to seeing when he wears the shirt for the first time. But he'll be somebody that will give them a boost immediately.
For sure. Well, let's get to the part of the show that we were not so much looking forward to, but This is what we do. It's for the fans. It's for our loyal listeners, loyal viewers out there. So, Jay, is Texas back this week?
Hold on, this is just coming. Sources are telling me that Texas is not back. I will confirm Texas is not back this week.
All right. So for our We're Back segment, Texas is not back. This is our first show since the Oklahoma game. We're a week out from it now. There's so much drama surrounding this program beyond just how they play. I mean, we're not going to get into we could talk about this all day, and this is probably something we'd like to have Mike on for to discuss. And obviously, there's going to be a lot happening throughout this football season, so we're going to get Mike back on soon to kind of get an update on where things are. But this program is just in shambles right now.
It's not really a better way to put it. I mean, I was trying to think of it looks like we're literally watching a program go from, what we thought was going to be a rebirth of the culture of winning at the University of Texas, and instead we're going the opposite direction. We're seeing the exact opposite of the rebirth. It's almost like, oh no, this is the same old Texas. This is the same undisciplined, unprepared, undercoached, underdeveloped team that we've seen for the last decade. I'm as guilty as anybody of buying into the hype before the season started. It just made too much sense on paper for this not to work. And that is why I'm fully on the side of thinking that Tom Herman is not the guy for the University of Texas.
No, I think he's done. I think he's completely done. And I think, well, I don't know. I wouldn't say he knows it, but I think the people that matter know it, in terms of the big money rollers that provide cash for this program know it. There's a lot of back history there too. I mean, just in the sense of when Charlie Strong was fired, the stories about basically an internal conflict between the Dallas big money donors and the Houston big money donors and all these things. And the Houston donors were like basically the ones that engineered the entire Tom Herman hiring. And I mean, I think this is a situation. Chris Del Conte's he's given Tom Herman his mulligan. There was already talk last year. Remember, me and you attended that Tech game last year, the final home game of the season. Mm-hmm. Going into that game, this program was in a tailspin, and it was, they're coming off that just terrible Baylor loss, the TCU loss. This was like they were just in a complete tailspin. And the vibe there was like, if Texas screws around and loses this game to Tech and goes 6-6, Herman's gone. And apparently around that time, the donors had already reached out to Chris Del Conte and said, like, we've got the money for the buyout. Money is not an issue with this. If he's not the guy, we'll make this thing happen. But Chris Del Conte gave him the opportunity to replace essentially hire a completely new coaching staff. And that was one of the things that gave me hope going into this season. When we talked about on the preview show, like, do we really trust Tom Herman yet to be a winning championship level coach? My optimism came from, like you said, you look at the team on paper, you look at the talent there, you look what they're returning, and you look at how mediocre the Big 12 is. And that Tom Herman went out and hired a bunch of guys that have pretty good resumes. Like they've had success elsewhere. This looked promising going into the season. I absolutely think after these last couple weeks, his fate has been sealed. I think the big money, the people that matter, have reached out to Chris Del Conte and basically said, it's over, man. We got a check waiting on it. You just let us know like what the amount is to fill out. But I think he's done at Texas. I absolutely think he is. And now to me, the only question is how far down the drain does this team go in this atmosphere before Chris Del Conte pulls the trigger for a mid-season firing, which I don't think is going to happen. But
No, I don't
how
either.
how ugly can or will this get at this rate? This is, I mean, honestly, this isn't like Charlie Strong's last season, which was a fairly like untalented team
Yeah.
that just played like a bad football team. This is a team that, and it wasn't just us, national media, all those things were saying could be a playoff contender. This is the year that Texas was supposed to win this league and be in the conversation for a playoff spot. Like this is a collapse, right? We're witnessing it.
Yeah, we're in the middle of it. And it's hard to watch when the expectations were so high. It's disappointing, it's just, to me, that's what it is. It shouldn't even be surprising at this point because we've seen what the culture of this program is. And I don't know that Tom Herman ever really had an identity as a coach in terms of like establishing a culture in a program. He had some success at his previous stops, but you never really got to see him fully develop a program into his own culture, into his own, stop here, 2 years here, coordinator, graduate assistant, when you're going in the back into his history. And now we're seeing that whatever it is that is like the foundation of his, whatever that means to him, the foundation of building a program, it's not made for Big 12 football, for big time college football. I don't think that as a head coach, he has the ability to install whatever winning culture is to him. I don't think it will ever translate for him, at least not yet. I mean, I know he's a young coach, like he still has time, but this is why I'm getting to this is the next coach that comes to Texas, no more of this learning on the job bullshit. Like,
No.
That's what Tom Herman is doing. We're seeing growing pains in a young head coach. That's not to do at the University of Texas. Go do that somewhere else. So I think that when we look back at this, we'll say, man, like it seemed at the time like he was a good hire, and then it turns out like it was another failure from this administration to bring in the right kind of guy to turn this thing around. I don't see it shaping out any other way.
No. And I think when you add in the kind of reports that were coming out this week about from multiple kind of insider outlets that have connections to the program, but this discussion about his insubordination towards Chris Del Conte and towards the university president, I think that just adds an extra element to it. Charlie Strong may not have been a great football coach at Texas. He might not be a good head coach at all, judging by the stops that he's made, but he wasn't insubordinate.
Right.
Like the athletic department was a mess and all those things, but like, nobody ever really called Charlie Strong like a bad guy or was like, oh, this guy's an asshole. And like, by all accounts, Tom Herman's a huge asshole. Like it's his personality, but he's an asshole that doesn't win.
Yeah, that's a great point. You don't mind as much if your coach is an asshole if he's winning football games. Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, those guys are winners and don't care.
Spurrier.
Exactly. Assholes. But like and we've seen it with Tom Herman with the headbutting and the double birds and all of the things that you look at it, and when he's your coach, it's like, oh, okay, all right, that's kind of funny. Yeah, all right. But if you look at it from the outside and you're like, this guy's immature. He doesn't, he's insubordinate. He doesn't take things as seriously as he should. At least that's what it comes off as. even though he's the smartest guy in the room, and he'll tell you that if you ask him, it doesn't seem like he's, fully developed yet into the type of head coach that anybody would want to run a big program. He's still learning. He's still maturing as a human, it seems like.
Yeah, to me, he's kind of like the budget John Malkovich, but Malkovich won trophies,
Won a couple, yeah.
you know,
Won a few.
but like just that kind of arrogance and like, I don't know, just angering everybody within Belmont kind of thing. But Malkovich won some games. He won some conferences. He was successful. He had success. Tom Herman hasn't had that kind of success. And, in retrospect, that Sugar Bowl may have been, the poison chalice for this program. Beating Georgia, I think really, judging by what the quarterback said on the podium after the game, I don't remember what that was, but I think it was,
"We're back."
But I mean, it kind of
Still
gave
not back, fam.
Well, not only did it give Tom Herman a sense of like, okay, yeah, we're big boys in the college, in this college landscape now. Put this thing in cruise control because we're Texas. It also gave Chris Del Conte enough, reassurance. God, I hate even saying that. Enough reassurance to give Tom Herman an extension, which is now what we're dealing with. And that's where I think if there wasn't that extension there and the extra buyout money, I think this thing would be a done deal.
Well,
But that extension's tacked on. He's going to make over $6 million the next couple seasons, and it's like,
what are the optics though of buying out a contract when people have already around the athletic department have taken pay cuts, and like if there's money, what are the optics of buying out a coach's contract just specifically during this time? Like, do you feel like there's something to that?
Yeah, I don't think it looks good. I think like you said, from the optics standpoint, it's pretty poor. I mean, I think and there is a larger discussion to be had about like coaches making $6 million plus in the middle of a pandemic when
Right.
students can't attend classes. Teachers are getting furloughed. 2 staff members at UT have died of COVID this year. I think there's a larger discussion to be had about that. But at the same time, that doesn't, there's a lot of people up in the higher tier of the economic brackets of our society that want to see a winning football team and have more than enough money to play with. And to them, screw the optics. I want to win football. You know what optics they want? A winning football team. But who gives a shit if some liberal arts grads like myself and all, those students that sit there and go, maybe the university shouldn't be dishing out millions of dollars to just tell a guy to go stay at home. Like maybe that's a little off. Those guys don't give a shit about that.
Yeah.
The oil wells are pumping. Red McCombs is selling cars. The money's flowing in. Give us a winning football coach. That's all that matters. Here's the check.
I think for Texas to be taken seriously across the country again, there's going to have to be an attitude of just win. What do you need to do to win? I'm not saying like pay your players, and I'm not saying like videotape your opponent's practices type of cheating and getting advantages like that. I mean, you do whatever it takes to win in terms of screw what anybody says.
You can say that,
this.
Jay. I mark on YouTube. I mark that it's not a child-friendly show, so don't worry. You're fine. You can say it. This is a passionate conversation.
It is like fuck what anybody thinks. Screw the optics. We're gonna win, and we're gonna do whatever it takes to do that. Like, at what point do you have to, as a university, as an athletic department, or whatever it is, to stop caring so much about what the optics are and just do what it takes to win? Really, just win. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that Nick Saban is, he does whatever. That's a guy that does whatever it takes to win, period. And it's Nope. Urban Meyer. You hear the reputation that Urban Meyer has, and Urban Meyer is somebody that in our circles we've discussed as somebody that we would want Texas to at least pick up the phone and call and see if there's interest, because at this point, why not? What's the point in bringing in these guys that fit this certain mold or check off these boxes or whatever it is, don't have this baggage? Just win football games. Nobody cares about the rest of that stuff if you're winning football games. Just win. And Tom Herman's not going to be a winner here. He's not cut out yet for, he's not ready for prime time. He's not the guy. Go get somebody that's not going to have to learn on the job, that has done it before, and just win. Forget everything else. Just win. Because Texas is not, we've talked about this on our show before. Texas, for whatever reason, Texas football fans carry around this aura like, oh, we're in the big boys, and it is a blue blood. Texas is, if when you look across the history of college football and total wins and all that stuff, sure. But what has Texas done to say, like, we should be discussed in the same breath as Alabama? And nothing.
Nothing.
Like, this is a mediocre football program that Mac Brown found a way consistently to win 10 games a year for that stretch, which we look back on it now and it's like, damn it, we were mad that he would never get over the hump. We were so fortunate to win at such a consistent level with him.
Yeah.
And just to get the one title out of that, you're disappointed, but you look back and you're like, man, it was nice to win consistently.
Yeah, at least always in the conversation.
Yeah, at least you knew, okay, we're going to lose to Oklahoma this year, but we're going to kick the shit out of a lot of other people. And now you don't even know that. Kansas plays this program tough every year.
This program plays down to its competition regardless of what level it's at. And, but we kind of had an interesting exchange this week talking about this whole mess with the athletic department. And I think I mentioned something about like, bring back the lost Dodds. Why don't you and we spent so many years complaining about DeLoss. And I think a lot of it is justified, but a lot of complaining about DeLoss. But the thing with DeLoss was he understood this place. He understood Texas. He was the keeping up with the Joneses. We are the Joneses. That's the attitude that brought about the whole weird Texas, all that thing was because of guys like DeLoss Dodds. Spend the money. Go get this program. And that's what there's this like, oh, don't get Urban Meyer. Like this guy's, he's kind of a scumbag, all these things. This is a program that almost hired Gary Barnett, before going with Mac Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And the weird Texas thing, Texas is not going to be Texas unless it starts acting like Texas, the way that it's perceived. They have to start acting that way. And I think that is when this will kind of fall into place. Like you said, go get a winner. That's the only option at this point. And there are 3 coaches in my mind that fit that mold: Nick Saban, Dabo Swinney, Urban Meyer. I don't even know if Dabo really fits that mold. I know he's got just a machine rolling at Clemson right now, but Nick Saban and Urban Meyer have done it at multiple places. They have multiple national championships at different schools. I have no doubt in my mind that within 2 to 3 years, Urban Meyer would have this Texas program as a juggernaut in the playoff chase each year. And maybe he only sticks around 4 to 5 years like he did at Ohio State. They're not going away. He set that program up and has Ryan Day just rolling that thing along.
Yeah. Of the 3 guys you mentioned, I think he's the most likely to consider taking that job, right? I think you make the phone calls, though. I don't think you don't call. It's like you're at a university that's brash enough to put out the phrase, what starts here changes the world. Like, that's the attitude. Like when people that aren't Texas supporters or whatever see that, and it's like, really? Like that's kind of a brash statement to put out there. But the weird Texas thing, the what starts here changes the world, all of those things, like when you say you're like when you say you're the Joneses, you have a tendency to actually act like the Joneses more often. You're not trying to play catch up and be like Oklahoma or be like a winning program that that wins consistently because you set the standard. Texas doesn't have a standard right now.
Nope.
They've got a bunch of undisciplined players that get stupid penalties, that flex over ball carriers that just got a 15-yard gain. Like Chris
God,
Brown
that was
has done that.
so bad.
Chris Brown has done that like 4 times in the last 2 games where it's like a 20-yard play and a first down for the other team. And he's like sitting over the guy like flexing. It's like, dude, have a clue about the situation and what just happened. And that's just that's one piece of this program's ineptitude and inability to have any sort of discipline is shit like that. And it's not like somebody saw it and was like, hey man, like I know you made a big play and I'm not mad at you for being happy, but because he did it multiple times.
Yeah, someone's got to pull him aside and be like, dude, that shit's got to stop.
And if it's not a coach, it's got to be a teammate that pulls him aside and says, look, bro, it was 3rd and 15. He had an 18-yard play. I know you had a big hit on him, but they got a first down. Have an understanding of the situation. It's like what was the when it was like 3rd and long and they had the big long play to get it down to 4th and what would basically have been 4th and 1 and an opportunity to actually go for it there and maybe score a touchdown. And then Angelau comes out of nowhere. Was that the Angelau or
Oh, that was Kerstetter.
It was a Kerstetter penalty where he just comes out of nowhere and hits the guy for no reason. Like the play's done. And this is a guy that you expect to be an NFL prospect and the leader on your offensive line.
Yep.
And when those guys are making those sort of dumb penalties and getting the team pushed back to where instead of 4th and 1 and an opportunity to go for it and try to score a touchdown, it's 4th and 16 and you got to bring Dicker the kicker on, which he made the field goal, but like.
Yeah, but that's they were in a position to score a touchdown there.
Yeah. So
that was 4 points off the board because of that decision, which would have, in the end, made a difference with how that game played out against the worst Oklahoma team in probably a decade.
You look at this, it's like when Texas does force Texas forced some turnovers against Oklahoma. Like it's not that they weren't, like the defense wasn't making plays here and there and giving the offense opportunities. It's just there's no consistency there. It's like you have Osai came around and forced the fumble and then they go 3 and out and the Texas hits that punt block because he held on to it for 5 seconds too long. Like that's undisciplined. The guy had the punter is so inconsistent. He's the best player on the field at times because he can nail it down inside the 5. And then you see other times where he's like running and I'm going to hold the ball with the rugby style. And he held on to it for way too long and cost him. Like it's just a totally undisciplined football team. And even when they do respond well to sudden changes and stuff like that, the very next drive they're out there, they're shooting themselves in the foot again. It's frustrating to watch. And when you bring in a coach like an Urban Meyer, who doesn't put up with that shit, who actually, establishes discipline in his program and doesn't allow for those things to happen, that's when you start winning ball games consistently. And Herman ain't the guy, man. It's just
no, he's not. And I feel like this is a little similar to the Kevin Sumlin situation at A&M. Both U of H guys, previous stops, Sumlin at least got a Heisman out of somebody, but at least to me, it seems like it's kind of the same thing. Starting to see the discipline issues. You're starting to see the players get the transfer portal. I mean, what was that? Sumlin lost both Kyle Allen and Kyler Murray to transfers. Both are playing on Sundays. And but what did A&M do? They moved on from them. And I know a lot of people made fun of this, just the way that, they give national champion plaques to somebody before they've coached a game there. But they went out and spent the money to get Jimbo Fisher.
Yep.
And that's we can talk about the 10-year contract and we can talk about the guaranteed money and all those things that it took for A&M to go pull Jimbo Fisher from Florida State. But they did it.
Yep.
They went and did it. And that's where Texas is they out Texas. That's something that people expect Texas to do. Is this like, the 10-gallon cowboy hat, march into the coach's office and throw a stack of money on their desk and say, "You're coming with us."
Yeah,
Try to match it, Florida State. And that's the attitude I think Texas has to take in order. That's the lost odds. The we are the Joneses attitude. I don't know if Chris Del Conte has that type of attitude in him. I know he's a great fundraiser, all those kinds of things. I don't know if you have to have that attitude, but I think he hears enough from the donors and from the big people involved that are saying like, man, let's do this. Get this over. Get Saban on the line and make him say no. Get Dabo on the line and make him say
exactly.
no.
Make him say no. You have to.
Urban
You
doesn't
have
have
to.
a buyout. Make him say no. He's sitting there in the TV studio, which, by the way, it's interesting to watch how he talks about Texas week in and week out.
I was going to bring that up. I'm glad you did. Yeah, that's a great point, man.
Well, what are your observations on that? What do you think about how he mentions Texas on the Fox pregame and their studio show there?
Well, the way that he talks about it, it sounds to me like he feels like they have a program with the players that are there. They have the ability that they should be winning. Basically, I get the feeling like in his mind, he's thinking like, if I was in that job, I'd be winning with those players. That's the sort of feeling that I get from him.
Well, did we not talk about this in the off season when he said something about Chris Ash?
Yep.
About how this is a guy that's going to stabilize this defense. He thinks the world of him, all these kinds of things. And I think we discussed a point about like, is this him basically setting up Tom Herman to be the fall guy when this thing doesn't work? Because he had some caveats in there about like, oh, well, as long as they've got proper fundamentals and they're all those kinds of things, Chris Ash is going to kill it there as a defensive coordinator. And it's like, oh, it sounds like he's taking a little bit of a shot at Herman. This seems to be kind of playing out, right? And that's
yeah, no, absolutely. And it makes sense. Like it's not as far-fetched as I think people might have in their minds that he would take this job. Like I know Tom Herman's still the coach, and it's sort of weird, talking about replacing a somebody that's not fired yet. Sometimes is a little bit weird because we don't know, like you said, we don't know if there's going to be this year or next year. I don't even care, to be honest with you, because I think Tom Herman will show that he's not the guy and will force the hand, and they'll have to get rid of him.
Yeah, it's going to play it's going to work itself out basically.
Right, but we're watching Urban Meyer right now. The way that he talks about this team and the way I really think it's just unfolding in front of our eyes, and we may look back at this in a couple of years and be like, hey, you remember when we mentioned that he was really talking about Texas, and then he'll go in and do it. I don't see. You have to make this. You have to go back to being Texas, like you said. A&M out Texas. That's a great way of putting it, and I think Texas needs to claim that sort of crown back. Because even though A&M hasn't won much since they've gone over to the SEC, they had a big win last week, and that's one of those things where you look at a program on the rise and look for big wins that are regular season wins. Like bowl games are always a separate thing for me. That's a separate separate set of things.
Yeah.
But when you find a program that's starting to win big time games in the regular season against conference opponents, that it makes me feel like A&M is sort of passing the trajectory that Texas is, what we thought Texas would be taking. And we sort of see these parallels, these two programs that are parallel right now. And this is a very important time for Texas to figure out if they're going to stay on that same trajectory or if they're going to turn it around and start heading in the right direction. Because whether or not A&M got the right guy for them, they went out and they flexed and got the guy that they wanted. And that to me is impressive enough. And Texas needs to take that example and follow it.
Yeah, a couple little anecdotes on the Urban Meyer thing that came to, like, from a while back. Apparently, and I don't have this right here in front of me, but I guess when Tom Herman was the offensive coordinator for Urban Meyer at Ohio State, I think Herman said this around when he took the Texas job, with that Tom Herman or Urban Meyer told Tom Herman, I guess in a discussion, something at that point when they were working together, that Urban Meyer said that the Texas job is the best job in the country. He thinks that is if you can get things rolling there, that's the best job in the country. And apparently another thing was after he left the University of Florida and was doing his TV stuff before taking the Ohio State job eventually, he mentioned something that after Florida, there was only 3 places in the country that he would coach again: Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas.
Yep. It's obvious what he thinks about the job. It always has been. And the respect that he has for this, for the brand, I guess, and for what, because he's smart enough to know what comes with winning here. And he's exactly right. There's not a better job in the country if you're winning than Texas. There's not. And imagine being able to know, I've gone into this program and won. I've taken this program over and won. What would that do for Urban Meyer's legacy to go then to Texas? And, that could be his last stop in his career, right off into the sunset after reestablishing a culture at Texas and being responsible for being the guy that did that at the University of Texas. That all sounds pretty sweet to me. So, I mean, it's making more and more sense by the day for him to be the guy. And if they don't make him say no, at least try and ask and make him say no. That lets me know that Texas, in terms of behind the scenes, isn't where they need to be.
Yeah.
At this point to make the right calls to turn it around.
Yeah, I think winning a national championship at 3 different spots, which, let's not get it twisted here. If Urban Meyer was at Texas, he would bring Texas into the national conversation. That's one thing, you talk about, Nick Saban, the amount of national championships he's won. We talk about the greatest coaches of this era and all those kinds of things. You go, oh, well, Saban won at LSU and he's won a ton at Bama. Urban Meyer enters that conversation when you go, he won a national title at 3 different programs. And he damn near, in a different time would have had Utah in that conversation, won a BCS bowl with them. Like, that has to be on his mind in terms of his legacy. Like you said, to bring a program like Texas back, which actually, when you think about the dynamics of the university and the program, all those things, his previous stops, Florida and Ohio State, are fairly similar in terms of the university dynamic, the size, all those things, to Texas. Like, he knows how to work in this, kind of high pressure environment, if you will.
Yep. And
this isn't bringing in, like, I've heard some people mention like Brian Harsin. I know he's won some games at Boise. That ain't it. If he didn't like the culture and the pressure and the atmosphere working under Mac Brown in Austin, what's he going to do when he's the head guy? Right. And that's where there's only, to me, unless something crazy happens, it's Urban Meyer to me is the slam dunk. If Texas moves on from Tom Herman, that has to be the guy. Has to be the guy. But we'll reach that point if we get there. But like you said, I think we will know these games are going to play out, and I think this is going to reach the natural resolution that we all see coming. And just hope the ones with some coin have their checkbooks ready.
Is it important for you, for Texas, because Oklahoma State's playing really well right now, and Baylor's dealing with some problems? And is it important that Texas and Baylor get that game played before playing Oklahoma State for Texas? Like, because I don't necessarily want to go in to Stillwater with this sort of coming off of this Oklahoma loss. I don't think playing Oklahoma State after that and not having anything to build on would be good at all. I think I've picked Oklahoma State to win that game from the beginning of the season. But what, in your mind, is it important that they go out and get a game in against Baylor and try to fix some of these things? Or do you think it's just too far gone? Like, is there a point can we salvage anything out of the season?
I think in one sense, yes, it's important. I think the one thing I think Tom Herman has had a decent bit of success with is these kind of bounce back games, rally the troops, it's us against the world type feeling. There's the part of me that says that Baylor, even now, without Matt Rule and all those things, are still a better coach team than Texas. And Aranda's a good coach. I know they're having the COVID issues there, and we'll see if this game gets played next week. But I still think Baylor's in that game.
Sure.
I don't think whether this Texas team plays well and beats Baylor or however that game plays out is not going to have any bearing on what happens in Stillwater. At this point, I'm fully expecting Oak State to handle business that night. Maybe if that's the first game back and they've had 2 weeks of dwelling on the OU game, that they're just angry and ready to go out and hit somebody. But I still don't trust this team to play within their emotions and play that's why I don't know if it makes a difference.
I would love to see that sort of emotion out of this team like that. But
it always feels so forced with this group, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it feels like almost it feels fake. Yeah.
Like headbutting your players before a game and then losing like 27-0 or whatever that final score was against Baylor, or all the gimmicks. Like their emotion and trying to, like, it just feels like a gimmick. So I don't know. That's a great question. Like, if this team plays Baylor next week, and that's where every game from here on out is a wild card for me. Absolutely. I don't think of course we're going to do our show and we're going to try to predict what we think the game will be and what we'll see and the scores and all those things. I don't think any of us can predict what team is going to show up Saturday to Saturday. But I feel pretty confident that Oklahoma State's a better coached football team. They're extremely talented. It's a team that we've discussed in the offseason as a team that can win the Big 12, and now I'm really confident that they can win the Big 12. And, for all of his faults, I think Gundy sees Texas going into Stillwater in a couple weeks as an opportunity to kind of drive the nail into the coffin.
Oh, yeah.
Set Texas back into another reset mode. I think that team's going to be ready to go. I trust Mike Gundy to have his football team ready more than I trust Tom Herman to have his football team ready.
That speaks a lot to how much we don't trust Tom Herman right now.
Especially on the road. Tom Herman has struggled with this program on the road and going into
if you trust Mike Gundy more than you trust your head football coach, you have the wrong head football coach. That to me is that's where we are right now, though, man. Like, that's where we are with this program. It's you're saying that you trust Mike Gundy more than Tom Herman, and you're serious. This is like legit. This is not a bit, and we're having this conversation right now. It lets me even further know that Tom Herman isn't the guy. It's just it doesn't make any sense for me that the Gundy who just speaks and says whatever he says and does whatever he wants to do and blah, blah. And he finds a way. He does have an identity. Oklahoma State has an identity.
Yep.
What's Texas's identity? What's Tom Herman's identity as a head football coach? We don't have an answer to that. At least Oklahoma State knows their identity. They know the identity of that program. We don't know what Texas is, and we haven't for a long time. So bring a guy in that's going to, allow us to answer that question, that's going to establish an identity, that has done it at multiple places before and won. Like, make this happen. There's no reason that we should be having this discussion about Mike Gundy being a better fit for his program than the guy at the University of Texas. It's ridiculous.
How many coaches in the Big 12, on that note, do you trust Tom Herman over?
I mean, maybe Les Miles, maybe, but even then on the Les Miles has shown that he can outcoach Tom Herman already. So I mean, I don't know, man. And it's weird to say that in a year where the conference is really, I mean, it's still, we knew that this was going to be an average conference from top to bottom
Yeah.
going in. Like there would be a team or two that stands out, but we knew this was going to be an average conference this year.
But like, I mean,
Even
we
saying
don't,
that,
our
like,
sample size isn't large enough to say like, oh, I trust Dave Aranda to have his team
right,
ready to go over.
right.
So, maybe not that one. I think you can maybe even argue Matt Wells at Tech. We don't quite know, but it seems he kind of has things turning there. So I can't really say, I don't know if I would trust him so much, to have his team ready over, although they took it to Texas and Lubbock a few weeks ago,
Yeah,
they choked it away, or it didn't work out for them. They didn't so much choke it away, but
no,
like,
but when we talked to Jack Densmore, our tech insider, about that team, he knew what the identity of that team wanted to be. He knew what the coach wanted to go in there and do. Like, you can
right,
say
exactly.
whatever you want about the program in general, but Jack told us what the identity of the program, exactly what the coach wanted to do and what he
Right.
needed to be successful. You cannot do that here at Texas. So in that regard, it's like he is a step above Tom Herman at this point, because he's not, at least you know what he's trying to establish there. What is Tom Herman trying to establish at Texas right now? What direction is this program going in? It's not the right one, and it's nothing that's going to be successful. Excuse me. It's nothing that will be successful over a sustained period of time.
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
Right. And just thinking through it, I think Aranda, just because of the sample size, is the only one at this point that I wouldn't take or wouldn't trust over Herman. I just don't know, but Aranda's been enough places and been successful that I kind of, do trust him. But like Matt Campbell, we don't even need to talk about that. Kleeman at Kansas State, or Kleiman, however it's properly pronounced. Les Miles, I think that one's on the fringe, but Les has won titles. He's been a lot of places and had success. I trust him, as wacky as he can be, to have his team ready and have an identity. And like, Lincoln Riley, like, is Tom Herman which brings me to the next question of, if Tom Herman is that inconsistent and you can't trust him to that degree to where he's in the bottom 2 or 3 coaches in the Big 12 in terms of like who you would trust to have your team ready to go on a week-to-week basis. I mean, this really is just a case of the recruiting at Texas, the talent lifting it above in certain situations. Like just like the Kansas game last year, they were out-coached everywhere, but Texas had better players.
Yep.
So they won. I think what was it? The Kansas State game last year in Austin, which was a pretty good slugfest, good tight game. Texas just had better players. Like, that is such an indictment on Tom Herman's program. Like, it's amazing to me. So
he's got a chance here over these next few weeks to, and this is the whole cliche thing, and I'm sure he said it in his press conference, but the bye week couldn't have come at a better time for us. I always hear coaches say that, right? Well, I think that, in all honesty, the bye week could not have come at a better time for Tom Herman, in terms of, okay, guys, we legitimately have 2 weeks to put together a game plan that will be successful
for a school that, as of now, is missing 28 players with COVID.
And they're saying they're saying some of those are false positives. Some of them are. The point is, though, is that they're missing a lot of guys that aren't able to be around their team right now because of quarantine.
Right.
So this should be a game that Texas goes in with the proper game plan and outplays them.
Yeah.
Period. And if they can't overcome a Baylor team that's going through so much adversity right now, and find a way to really put a stamp on this game and win like Texas should win, I don't know what to say. Like, this should be a game that they should go in and take care of business. But it's in the air right now. It's a total coin flip, like you said.
It should be.
All these games are coin flips. All of them. I look down the schedule. Baylor, It's just Oklahoma State, that's a loss. West Virginia, that's a coin flip. Kansas, at Kansas. Les Miles is going to have them ready to play.
It might be a little cold there too, so I know that's going to be
Yeah.
adversity for Texas to face.
Matt Campbell bringing in Iowa State to Austin on November 27th, the day after Thanksgiving. And then Kansas State to finish the season. Pick one of those games and put your house on it, which one they're going to win.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Pick one. I mean, that you're confident enough to do something like that on. You couldn't.
Nope.
But that's
the thing. They'll probably split those games. That it's just he's a mediocre coach, and right now this is a mediocre program. 6-4 and 5-5, which 5-5. You run down those games. That's only 3 more losses over the course of this season. That is not, by any stretch of the imagination, out of question here.
No.
When you're talking about trips to K-State, Iowa State at home, trips to Stillwater, struggled with Kansas last year. Who knows what we're going to get with Baylor? Like, you start laying all that out, it's very well within the realm of possibility that Texas can lose 3 more games. I honestly think 6-4 this season is enough for Tom Herman to get fired. If he goes the stretch of this season with 1 more loss, maybe it's in Stillwater and runs the table the rest of the way. I don't know. I think that might be enough for Chris Del Conte to say, like, we just might not, this might not be worth. It's kind of on the borderline. I think 2 more losses, it's over. 3 more losses, he might not be on campus for that 3rd loss.
Right. I don't know. I just don't trust at this point. I don't trust Del Conte to make a difficult decision like that. If it's not coming down to raising funds for something, I don't really trust Del Conte at this point. Great at the fundraiser, and that's what that was the knock on him coming over from TCU, was that great fundraiser, great glad hander, whatever you want to say. But when it comes time to making important decisions and maybe having to upset some people to do it, he's not the guy that you want in that situation. With as dicey as it looks, with the optics of paying a coach that's sort of a buyout right now, it really makes me feel like Del Conte would not want to pull that trigger, and it would have to come from over the top of him.
And I think it will
to
be.
Make that decision. Yeah,
I think it will
it'll
be.
have to be. So
I don't think this is going to be his decision at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yep. I'm with
Sorry,
you.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
That was it. No, that's the point. You're right. You're exactly right. I don't think it's going to be his decision at the end of all this. You're exactly right. It's going to come down to the money, the big money, and the president of the university, and it's just going to,
Well, and I think also, we talk about the optics of spending money to buy somebody out, and which I think is totally, absolutely legit in a conversation to have. I also think, though, that there is an expense to put on not making the decision from the Texas financial standpoint. I think this thing is so far gone at this point that if a change isn't made, Chris Del Conte is not just looking at, of course, the attendance thing is one thing, but where's going to be the interest in season tickets to watch this again next year? Who's going to sign up for that? Second, there's already been whispers about the big donors that are paying for that south end zone construction, that are paying for a basketball arena and other facilities upgrades and those things. Where's that? There's already talk about some people saying, maybe I'm just not going to send that next check to help fund that thing. And that's a $25 million project or whatever that's happening there in the south end zone. And that's where, to me, it's like, I almost feel like it's going to be more costly for the athletic department to keep Tom Herman than to make the change when they know it's not the right fit.
That's a fair argument. It's just,
it's hard to argue the optics of that, just to kind of be like, yeah, we're going to keep the guy so we can build our end zone, and but it's different. The media play like, oh, well, this guy got fired, they're paying him this much money. How ridiculous. But I think there is some nuance to it, in that if you keep Tom Herman, it's going to potentially, for the athletic department at least, it's not my money, be more painful for them to keep him around than just to fire him.
how big of a hole do you need to dig before you get the next guy in there to help you get back out of that hole? Like how deep do you want to bury this program? How deep do you want to bury the support of your big money donors? How do you want to alienate your fan base, your season ticket holders? Del Conte's made some good decisions with the pregame stuff out around campus, and that was all a hit. Like that's
Yeah.
again, but that's all the making people happy part. That's all the, we'll do these nice things to you to draw fans here for this and that and the other, and we'll create that environment, because that's not a tough thing to do. That's an easy decision to make. Oh, do you want to make the fans happier? You want to give them a better experience? Hell yeah, let's do that. That's not a tough decision. But making a call to fire a coach that is just not the guy, to put it off any longer, you make a great point. It's like, what's the ratio? What am I trying to come up here?
Just the balance of it. Yeah.
The balance of keeping him or getting rid of him is just.
Yeah, and I think the dynamic.
I don't trust Del Conte to do it.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think one thing that plays into Del Conte's hand a bit is he wasn't the guy that hired Tom Herman. He does have that to kind of go off of, but also I think the dynamic is a bit different around the fans and the program this time around. When Charlie Strong, in year 3, when that obviously wasn't working out, there was still a sense of, well, just, this isn't working, get Charlie out of here, go hire Tom Herman, and this thing, only 3 years removed from Mac Brown, can be salvaged. Now we're in year 4 after Charlie Strong. I think that the optimism of bringing Tom Herman in also helped Del Conte with things like setting up Bevo Boulevard and Longhorn City Limits and all those things. There was a sense of like, okay, maybe the ship is turning around and all that. I'd be really curious, like in a normal season, and if fans were fully allowed and able to tailgate and all those kinds of things, what the vibe at Longhorn City Limits and those kinds of things would be going into the Baylor game next week. All those things, like the carnival games and all that stuff is fun when like the program is fun. When you're already dreading going to the football game because what you're going to see on the field, and that however much money you paid for those tickets that season, and you're going because it's what you do on a Saturday, then that's when it starts to feel cheesy. And that's when the fans start to go, well, oh, the jetpack guy, all those kinds of things, this stuff. But that's when those things start to go the other way. And at that point, that's where, like you said, I think the donors start reaching out and going, Chris, it's really great what you're doing with the tailgate scene out there, but the football sucks. And that's what I pay season ticket money for, and I donate to this program for. You got to make a change.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that Texas might also have to fire a basketball coach after this season, and that's another conversation. But I think I'm actually looking forward to watching that team this year. For whatever reason, I feel like the players are there that can at least be fun to watch. But you may be looking at that. We may be, depending on the season that Shaka Smart has, we could be looking at getting rid of your two major coaches or whatever in your programs at your university and finding new coaches. Like, talk about being able to hit the reset button, not just for your football program, but for an entire athletic department. It makes sense. If Shaka can't show he's the guy this year, and Herman, we already know, is not the guy, like, why wouldn't you just totally hit a reset button for the entire, athletic department from the big program perspective, and just try to start over.
Yeah, I mean, none of the big 3 men's sports coaches are Del Conte hires.
Right.
Herman, Smart, and Pierce are not. Those were all before his tenure. The only major coaching hire that Chris Del Conte's made, I mean, the women's basketball coach, that was a splash.
Yep.
He went and got a big time winning pedigree coach to take over the women's basketball program. I'm hopeful that that's indicative of what the approach he's going to have with these other jobs. But Yeah, we'll get to the basketball team at a later. That brings about a whole nother
Yeah,
bout of stress. But
no kidding.
well, Jay, man, this has been great. I know we've gone long here today. Anything you want to hit on real quick before we
No,
call it?
man, I want it to be. I want this program to be successful. This football program to be successful, man. Like I really do. I've just like any other fan. I've had these ride the wave of momentum just to have it crash down on top of me again. And it's not. We joke around about they're not having fun on the 40 acres. They're not. Well, you know who else isn't having fun? Me on the couch, taking notes about a football game and writing things in all caps because it was a stupid fucking penalty or undisciplined or like just one more thing about the undisciplined nature of this team. The Oklahoma coaches, there was some dumb celebration penalty or whatever after a touchdown, and it was a big play, and you could very easily have gone in and just been like, all right guys, like that was don't do that again, but great job. Those Oklahoma coaches railed those guys that drew that penalty, absolutely just got in their faces and was like, that is unacceptable, that sort of thing. I'm sure there were some other choice words said, but like that's the sort of coaching and program that we need at the University of Texas, not what we have now. Like disciplined football is not what we're getting. We're not seeing a disciplined team, a good program. They're winning because of their talent, not because of their coaching. And it's
Yeah,
the
we're
most
talking about an
frustrating part
OU
about this.
program that benched their freshman quarterback to send a message in the Texas game. In the Texas game, that Lincoln Riley felt benching Rattler was for the greater good of the program. Like, hey, we're restocking, and this is a kind of a throwaway year. They've already lost, a couple games. For the big picture, bench Rattler to send a message for down the road. They still won. And
Yeah, because the backup quarterback came in and did what a good backup quarterback's supposed to do at a football program, and don't turn the ball over. Just guide the team. And he led him to a couple of scoring drives, and then Rattler gets the message, you get him back in there, and he finishes the game. And it's like, there's no way Texas should have allowed that to slip out of their hands like that. And it just speaks to where the program is right now, because they didn't hop on and take advantage and put their foot on the throat. They let him stick around with their backup quarterback, and then let their starter that got pulled come back in and regain his confidence.
but that's what, if we think about if Tom Herman did something like that would seem like, for as much as he perceives himself to just be this galaxy brained, Mensa, genius. Lincoln, like I just could not even fathom Tom Herman making that kind of decision for the greater future success of the program. Like, to have that kind of that vision to make that kind of decision in that moment without it being some kind of petty power move that him and his assistant coaches have pulled over the years. Like, oh yeah, we're just going to bench Colin Johnson for an entire quarter because, we're trying to send a message that he's not, just some big shot that got drafted and caught a touchdown against the Houston Texans last week. Right. Like,
It's time. We know who he is. We know who he is. He is who we thought he is who we thought he is. He was, whatever. Get him. It's time.
Yep.
I'm really, honestly, I'm looking forward to the Baylor game happening. Hopefully medical tests and all that stuff pending
Yeah.
for Baylor to overcome that. I'm hoping that game happens. I want to watch it, but I also don't want to watch it because I'm just sitting there like, man, going through another one of these weeks where they play. It's frustrating as a Texas fan to watch, man, and I know you're with me there. We'll see how this one goes, how it breaks down. This is going to be an important week of practice. I can't wait for Tom Herman's press conference on Monday to talk about how great a week of practice they had. Oh man, Sunday that might have been the best week of practice we've had the whole season. It's coming. Watch for it, guys and girls, because if you hear the press conference, he'll tell you how great their practices were and how focused they were and how much leadership was there. He's going to feed it to you. He's going to feed it to all of us. And I'm just done buying it.
So who's the first assistant he fires after the Baylor game? Because I feel like that's what's coming next.
Well, if it's that's like the save your job, you start firing other people sort of thing, taking over. Yeah, the Bill O'Brien approach.
Our special teams are terrible, so Jay Boulware's fired. He's been reassigned.
That's the one for me. It's Boulware. Yeah, I think it's easy to have him be the scapegoat there.
He's not a Herman buddy, although amazing that Boulware was so successful at Oklahoma with recruiting and coaching and everything there, that he's come to Texas and all of a sudden he forgot how to coach. Yeah, but yes, I agree. I think he's the first. I think he's the scapegoat when this thing starts to collapse, that Tom Herman.
Yep.
So, or maybe it's Jurisic and Herman. He pulls the Bill O'Brien and starts calling plays himself again.
Like literally like following it page by page, the Bill O'Brien, How to Save My Own Ass book. Yeah, that's I wouldn't be surprised. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, just like O'Brien did. So I wouldn't be surprised if he took offensive play calling back. And if he does do that, that's when we'll know that he knows he's in deep shit. That's when we'll know, man. So
what was that, week 2 we knew with Bill O'Brien when he oh yeah, this thing's about to come to an end. We didn't think it'd come to the end that quick, but
yeah.
Well, I know we had some other stuff we wanted to hit on, but I think this has been a great conversation. I think life is all about balance, right? The positivity of the Astros balanced out by the negativity around the Texas program. And it's going to be an interesting week. We'll get into our actual Texas Baylor preview coming up next week. I think it'd be a good week to have Mike back on. We'll see if we can get him.
We'll push to have Mike on to talk about that game with us and sort of get his, because he was at the Oklahoma game. Him and his brother went up to Dallas to watch that. And I wonder what that car ride home was like. I mean, because, as our listeners know, Mike has mentioned before that his brother played running back for the university in the early 90s. And and Mike is one of the most knowledgebo people about Texas football that we know. So I wonder what that car ride was like for them. And I'm curious to ask him. Hopefully we can get him on next week to preview Baylor and to sort of get his a temperature check from him on the program, which I'm sure he's there with us. But it's a point where hopefully we can work to have him on. So yeah, man, it's a good show this week. Let's hope they have the best week of practice ever over on the 40 acres. And
I don't doubt that they will. I think they're going to practice really hard and I think they're going to be ready to have fun against Baylor. We'll see. I'm going to think about it over the next week before I start thinking about my prediction and projection for the Baylor Bears coming into Austin. So if they can, so we'll see. But Astros tonight.
Yep.
Arsenal coming up here in a little bit. Astros tonight. Going to be a good day of sports all over the place. So we'll get this posted up. And thanks everybody for watching. And Jay, it's been a good one. Yeah, let's get it going again next week.
Good show, man. Good stuff. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Peace. Thanks everybody. See ya.
ATX represent Fatal, baby.